On my engagement day, my mom texted, "We're busy. Send pics." Then I opened Facebook. My entire family on a wine tour with my brother. Caption: Best day with the best people. That night, I pulled my name from the family trust and froze the mortgage payment account. 6 days later, my dad showed up, red-faced, pounding on my door. I opened it and said, "Guess the best people don't pay the bills." The morning I got engaged, I woke up with butterflies in my stomach and my phone already buzzing with excitement. At least, that's what I expected. Instead, I stared at a completely silent screen for 3 hours straight. You have to understand, my family had always been tight. We celebrated everything together. Birthday dinners that went until midnight, surprise parties for job promotions, group texts that never stopped pinging. For 28 years, they drilled it into me. Family first. Always. So when I finally proposed to Claire after 2 years together, I naturally assumed they'd be the first ones calling. By noon, I had exactly one text from my mom. "We're busy today. Send pics." That was it. No heart emojis, no congratulations. Not even a "can't wait to hear all about it." Just 5 words that felt like they'd been typed while she was doing something else entirely. I read those 5 words about 10 times, waiting for my phone to buzz with a follow-up message. Maybe an explanation, maybe an apology for being brief. Nothing came. I tried to shake it off. Maybe there was a genuine emergency. Maybe my nephew was sick, or they had some family crisis I didn't know about. Claire noticed I kept checking my phone during our celebration lunch with friends. "Everything okay?" she asked, squeezing my hand across the table. I smiled and nodded, not wanting to ruin our day with my growing disappointment. Around 1 p.m., while we were taking engagement photos in the park, I decided to post a quick picture to Facebook. The moment the app loaded, my heart sank straight through the ground. There, at the very top of my feed, was a post from my mom. Not just any post, an entire photo album titled, "Best Day with the Best People." The cover photo showed my parents, my brother Daniel, his wife Hannah, my cousin Mark, and even some family friends, all standing in a gorgeous vineyard, raising wine glasses and laughing like they were celebrating the most amazing day ever. I clicked through the album with trembling fingers. 37 photos of pure joy. Wine tastings, elaborate cheese boards, group selfies with the rolling hills behind them. In one photo, Daniel had his arm around my mom while they toasted with champagne. In another, my dad was making a silly face while everyone cracked up around him. They looked like they were having the time of their lives. The timestamp on the first photo? 10:30 a.m. They'd been there all morning, posting updates while I was sitting at home wondering why no one cared about my engagement. This wasn't some spontaneous adventure. You don't just round up 8 people and drive to wine country on a whim. This trip had been planned for weeks, maybe months. Which meant that while I'd been imagining my family rushing over to celebrate with me, they'd already decided where they'd rather be. I typed one word back to my mom's original text. "Cheers." Claire glanced at my phone but didn't ask questions. She knows me well enough to recognize when I'm processing something big. When I go quiet like that, it's not because I don't have anything to say, it's because I'm deciding exactly how I'm going to say it. That night, after all our friends had gone home and Claire had fallen asleep, I sat in our dark living room with my laptop open, thinking about the last 6 years of my life. When I sold my tech startup at 29, the first thing I did was set up a family trust. Not because anyone asked me to, but because I wanted to help. I took over my parents' mortgage payments, Daniel's car loan, my mom's credit card debt that had been haunting her for years. I never made a big deal about it, never held it over anyone's head. I thought that's what family did, you helped each other without keeping score. But sitting there in the dark, I realized something that made my stomach turn. I'd been keeping score all along, just not the way I thought. For 6 years, I'd been tracking every deposit, every payment, every bailout. What I hadn't been tracking was what I was getting in return. The answer was apparently nothing. Not even showing up on the biggest day of my life. I logged into the family trust account and removed myself as the primary trustee. Then I went into the automated payment system and froze everything. The mortgage account, Daniel's car payments, my mom's credit card autopay, all of it stopped with a few clicks. I wasn't stealing their money or draining their accounts. I'm not a thief. But I wasn't going to keep bankrolling people who could skip my engagement day to sip Pinot Grigio with my brother. 6 days later, someone pounded on my apartment door like they were trying to break it down. I opened it to find my dad standing there, face red as a tomato, breathing hard like he'd run up 4 flights of stairs instead of taking the elevator. He didn't wait for an invitation, he pushed past me into the living room like he owned the place. "The bank called," were the first words out of his mouth. Not, "Congratulations on your engagement," or, "How are you doing, son?" Just straight to business. 2 mortgage payments bounced. "Did you mess something up with the accounts?" That was his assumption. That I'd made some kind of mistake. That the perfect little financial safety net I'd been maintaining for them had just accidentally malfunctioned. "There's no mistake, Dad," I said calmly. "I stopped paying." He stared at me like I'd just announced I was moving to Mars. "What do you mean you stopped paying?" I explained everything. How I'd expected them to be there for my engagement. How I'd found them on Facebook, celebrating with Daniel instead. How that had shown me exactly where I stood in this family's priorities. He waved his hand dismissively. "Things come up. We'd already planned that wine tour for weeks. It wasn't worth canceling over one afternoon." "One afternoon?" I repeated. "Dad, I got engaged. This wasn't just any afternoon. You're taking this too personally," he said, and I swear something inside my chest actually cracked when he said it. I looked him straight in the eye. "Would you have been fine if I'd skipped your wedding to hang out with friends?" He didn't answer. Just clenched his jaw and looked away. Then came the line that sealed everything. "Your mom didn't mean anything by it." Not an apology. Not acknowledgement that they'd hurt me. Just an excuse. And in that moment, I understood exactly how they saw me. I wasn't their son in that situation, I was their bank. And banks don't have feelings. "The trust is dissolved," I told him. "The mortgage account is frozen. Daniel's car payments are over. Any emergency loans to cousins or extended family are done. If you want to live like I don't exist, you can pay for that privilege." "You're being selfish," he said. I actually laughed. "Dad, I've been paying your mortgage for 6 years without once holding it over your heads. If that's selfish, maybe you should try it sometime." He stormed out without saying goodbye, didn't even close the door behind him. The next morning, I got a text from Daniel. Not, "Congratulations on your engagement." Not, "Sorry we missed your big day." His first message to me in months was, "My car got repossessed. Fix this." No. Please. No explanation. Just a demand. I texted back. "Maybe you should have saved some of the money you spent on wine tours instead." His response was a string of curse words that would make a sailor blush. I didn't bother replying. That night, I sat down with a pen and paper and wrote out every single person in my family who'd ever borrowed money from me. Next to each name, I wrote exactly what I'd done for them, how much, how often, how long. The list filled 3 pages. It was like looking at the blueprint of a house I had been living in without realizing it was rotting from the inside. Daniel was at the top, but my parents were a close second. Then came the cousins, then family friends who'd somehow convinced me they were worth helping. I wasn't just cutting them off, I was going to let every single safety net unravel, one thread at a time. They had ignored me on the most important day of my life. Soon, they'd know exactly what it felt like to be ignored. 2 days after Daniel's car got repossessed, my phone started ringing. His name lit up the screen over and over. I watched it ring 4 times before he finally left a voicemail. He started off trying to sound reasonable, saying he knew something must have happened and we could work it out. But by the end of the 2-minute message, he was yelling, accusing me of playing games and making everyone suffer just to prove some point. I didn't call him back. Instead, I pulled out a folder from my desk labeled Daniel Financial. I'd kept it for years without thinking about it much. Car loan statements, insurance paperwork, credit card bills I'd quietly paid off when he forgot to make payments. It was all there, organized and documented, a complete record of every time I'd stepped in to save him from his own poor decisions. 3 years earlier, when Daniel had lost his job, I'd taken over his car payments. Not because I had to, but because without transportation, he couldn't work, and the whole family would have had to listen to him complain about how unfair life was for the next decade. I'd even kept paying his premium car insurance because he didn't want to downgrade to a cheaper plan. All of that stopped immediately. By the end of the week, Daniel had no car, no insurance, and overdue credit card bills for the first time in years. The family group chat exploded. My cousin Mark posted that he'd heard I was cutting everyone off. My aunt chimed in with, He's making it personal. My mom sent a terse, "We need to talk," which I ignored completely. My dad stayed silent. That Friday, Claire and I went out for a nice dinner at this little seafood place by the water. I didn't check my phone until we got home, but when I did, there were 11 missed calls from Daniel. His text told the whole story, starting polite, then begging, then blaming. His final message said, "If I lose my job over this, it's on you." The next week, that's exactly what happened. Daniel's company had been looking the other way about his attendance issues for months because he had reliable transportation for client visits. Without the car, they reassigned his accounts, and by Wednesday, he was unemployed. I felt no satisfaction watching it happen, just a cold kind of confirmation. For years, I'd been propping him up, thinking I was helping my brother succeed. All I'd really done was enable him to think he couldn't fail. The second I stepped back, reality took over. The real plot twist came when Daniel's wife Hannah called me. We'd never been particularly close. She'd always been polite but distant, like she wasn't sure how to treat the brother-in-law who quietly paid for half their lifestyle. She didn't waste time on small talk. "I just found out we're 3 months behind on rent," she said. "Daniel's been telling me you were still covering everything. I only learned the truth when the landlord showed up with an eviction notice." I told her she needed to take that up with her husband. "Could you at least give us a small loan to get by?" she asked. "Just until Daniel finds something?" "No," I said simply. By the end of the month, Daniel and Hannah had packed their belongings and moved into my parents' house. Which was exactly what I'd hoped would happen, because when they were all living under the same roof, taking them apart would be much more efficient. When Daniel and Hannah moved in with my parents, it was less like a happy family reunion and more like someone throwing a lit match into a pile of dry leaves. My parents tried to frame it as helping family during hard times. But I knew better. Daniel wasn't going to lift them up, he was going to drag them down with him. The tension started almost immediately. Hannah lasted exactly 3 days before complaining to my mom that she wasn't used to sharing a kitchen. My mom told her that in this house, everyone chipped in for groceries. That conversation didn't go well. Daniel wasn't any better. When my dad asked him to mow the lawn one evening, Daniel actually asked if he'd be paid for it. The look on my dad's face was priceless. I stayed completely out of it. I didn't need to stir the pot was boiling over all by itself. Instead, I focused on the bigger picture. For years, I'd been covering my parents' mortgage payments after they'd refinanced twice, once for my mom's medical bills, another time for a dream vacation to Europe that they never actually took. I'd never asked where that money went. I just kept paying. Now, with the payment account frozen, late fees were piling up. Foreclosure wasn't imminent yet, but the numbers were getting ugly fast. I decided to dig deeper into their finances. I called the bank and requested the complete account history. Since I was the co-signer on the original mortgage, they couldn't refuse me. That's when I discovered 2 large withdrawals labeled home improvement, one for $18,000, another for $12,000. But when I checked with the county, no construction permits had ever been filed for their address. The money had gone somewhere else entirely. I didn't confront them about it. Not yet. I printed everything out, slid it into a folder, and labeled it leverage. The next surprise came sooner than I expected. A woman from the county property office called me, saying they'd received a complaint about my parents running an unlicensed short-term rental out of their basement. I thought she had the wrong number until she mentioned Daniel's name. It turned out that without telling my parents, Daniel had listed their basement on Airbnb. He'd already hosted 2 weekend stays, pocketing the cash. My mom found out when a confused stranger with a rolling suitcase knocked on the front door asking where to check in. The explosion was immediate and spectacular. My mom screamed at Daniel in the driveway while half the neighborhood watched from their porches. Hannah slammed the guest room door so hard that a picture frame fell off the hallway wall. It was better than cable TV. My dad called me that evening, demanding I come over, right now, and sort this mess out. I told him I was no longer involved in their problems and hung up. Sitting in my quiet apartment that night, I realized something interesting. I didn't even need to keep attacking them. They were already destroying themselves. But that wasn't enough for me. I wanted to make sure they couldn't recover, not financially, not socially, not as a family unit. And I already knew exactly how to do it. It was going to be public, humiliating, and best of all, it would make them turn on each other so completely that they wouldn't even see me pulling the strings. I didn't rush the next phase. The most devastating damage isn't done in the heat of anger, it's done slowly, with precision, so your target never sees the blade until it's already buried deep. I waited until a Saturday morning when I knew all 4 of them would be home. My parents always slept late on weekends, Daniel and Hannah even later. By the time they were pouring their first cups of coffee, my plan was already in motion. The homeowners association in my parents' neighborhood was legendary for policing even the smallest infractions. Grass height, mailbox colors, acceptable Christmas decorations. These people lived for rules and gossip, which made them the perfect weapon. 2 days earlier, I'd mailed the HOA president a carefully prepared packet. Inside was a copy of the county's complaint about Daniel's unlicensed Airbnb operation, complete with screenshots of the listing and guest reviews that mentioned easy check-in, and hosts were very friendly. I didn't send it anonymously, my name was at the bottom in bold black ink. HOA meetings were open to all residents. I showed up early and sat in the back corner, just far enough away that I wasn't in their direct line of sight. When the president reached new business, she unfolded my packet and started reading aloud. By the time she got to the part about strangers coming and going at all hours of the night, several neighbors were muttering and shaking their heads. When she read the guest reviews out loud, someone in the front row actually snorted with laughter. That's when I handed over the second set of documents, the mortgage statements showing those mysterious home improvement withdrawals with no corresponding construction permits on file. The president didn't use the word fraud, but she didn't have to. The way people turned to look at each other made it crystal clear where their minds had gone. The meeting ended quietly, but the aftermath was swift. By Monday morning, the neighborhood Facebook group was buzzing with speculation. One post read, "Is it true the family name house is being run like a hotel?" Another asked, "Anyone know what happened to that renovation money they borrowed?" The next time I drove past their house, all the curtains were drawn tight. No cars in the driveway. A few lawn chairs were tipped over in the yard like no one had bothered to pick them up after the wind knocked them down. That night, Daniel called me. His voice was sharp, but I could hear panic underneath the anger. He accused me of humiliating the whole family, said people in the neighborhood were treating them like criminals now. "Maybe now you know what it feels like to be excluded and talked about behind your back," I told him calmly, then hung up before he could respond. I figured they'd try to ride it out, keep their heads down until people moved on to some other neighborhood drama. I was wrong. The next morning, I got an alert from the bank. The mortgage account I'd co-signed years ago had a status update. Property listed for sale. They weren't downsizing or relocating for a fresh start. They were fleeing. And the best part? I already knew exactly where they were planning to go, because I'd been 3 steps ahead of them for weeks. Word travels fast in families, especially when it's supposed to be a secret. My mom's cousin Lisa called me out of nowhere, using that syrupy sweet tone she always puts on when she wants to sound compassionate but can't hide how much she's enjoying the drama. "Your parents are starting fresh in a smaller place in Millbrook," she told me, probably expecting the news to hurt. "Getting away from all this mess, you know?" Instead of feeling hurt, I almost laughed out loud. They picked the one city where I had even more influence than I did here. Years ago, after selling my business, I'd invested in a small but profitable property management company in Millbrook. I eventually sold my shares, but the relationships remained strong. Realtors, landlords, inspectors, I'd done business with all of them. In real estate, reputation is everything. One phone call was all it took. I didn't ask anyone to block my parents outright, that would have been too obvious and sloppy. I simply shared copies of the HOA meeting minutes, the county rental violation with Daniel's name attached, and those mysterious mortgage withdrawal statements. I didn't add any commentary or explanations. The documents spoke for themselves. The first house my parents bid on was mysteriously pulled from the market right after their offer was submitted. The second house accepted another bid at the last minute, even though theirs was higher. By the third rejection, they were frustrated and confused, wondering why no one would sell to them. I stayed completely quiet and let them draw their own conclusions. Meanwhile, Daniel's life was crumbling in parallel. Without a job, car, or steady income, he started leaning heavily on Hannah's family for support. I knew that wouldn't last long. Her parents had always kept him at arm's length, barely tolerating him at family gatherings. By late fall, Hannah had packed up her things and the kids and moved in with her sister across town. She filed for separation 2 weeks later, citing Irreconcilable differences and financial stress. That left Daniel alone in my parents' increasingly unstable support system. He bounced between a few friends' couches before ending up in a dingy basement apartment in the kind of neighborhood where even the pizza delivery drivers won't go after dark. My parents, backed into a corner with their house sale falling through repeatedly, finally settled for a tiny rental on the very edge of Millbrook. The landlord was an old friend of mine from my property management days, someone who'd owed me a favor for years. I didn't ask for any special treatment. I just made sure he knew that rent was to be collected on the first of every month, no exceptions, no extensions, no sob stories. Within 3 months, they were struggling to keep up. My mom had taken a cashier job at a discount grocery store. My dad was doing odd jobs for neighbors, fixing fences, hauling junk, patching drywall for $20 an hour. Every few weeks, Lisa would call with updates, pretending to be concerned but really fishing to see if I'd softened my position. I never did. By December, our family group chat had gone completely silent. No holiday plans, no Christmas greetings, no obligatory photos of decorated trees or family dinners. It was like we never existed to each other. On New Year's Eve, Claire and I sat on the balcony of our beautiful new condo, champagne glasses in hand, looking out over the city lights. My phone buzzed once with a text from my mom. "I hope you're happy." I stared at those 5 words for a long moment before setting my phone down without responding. Because the truth was, I wasn't happy in the way she meant it. This had never been about joy or satisfaction. It was about balance, about consequences, about showing them exactly what it felt like to be treated like you don't matter. They had shown me with perfect, crystal clarity where I stood in their lives somewhere below a spontaneous wine tour with my brother. So I had simply mirrored that energy right back at them. Now there was nothing left to fix, nothing left to fight about, nothing left to prove. Just silence, peace, and the knowledge that the scales were finally balanced. For weeks after New Year's, I heard nothing from any of them. No calls, no texts, no updates from gossipy cousin Lisa. I thought maybe they'd finally accepted their new reality and moved on. Claire and I were planning a vacation to Italy when the final surprise landed right in my lap. It started with an email from my old banker, the same guy who'd helped me freeze the mortgage account months earlier. He said my name had come up in a routine file review not because I was in any trouble, but because my parents had tried to use my old co-signer status to apply for a large personal loan without my knowledge. The application was incredibly sloppy. They'd claimed I was in full agreement and would provide collateral for the loan. They'd even forged my digital signature on the consent forms. That alone could have landed them in serious legal trouble if I'd reported it to the authorities. Instead, I called the bank's fraud department and confirmed in writing that I had not and would not consent to any loans on their behalf, ever. Then I sent my parents a short, polite email. "I know about the loan application. Withdraw it immediately." 3 days later, I got an unexpected text from Hannah, Daniel's soon-to-be ex-wife. She said she'd heard through mutual friends that Daniel was telling everyone I'd ruined his life out of pure jealousy. The ironic part? That mutual friend was someone I'd actually helped Daniel get a job with years ago, and they knew the whole truth about every bill, every loan, every quiet bailout I'd ever provided. Hannah was shocked when she learned the real story. But the conversation took an interesting turn when she told me something I hadn't known. Daniel was secretly living back at my parents' rental house. Not officially moved in hiding there. Apparently, he'd gotten himself into trouble with some payday loan companies, missed several payments, and now people were regularly showing up at his apartment looking for him. So he'd run straight back to the 2 people who could least afford to help him. Sitting there with that information, I realized something that almost made me smile. I hadn't just taken away their money and stability. I'd left them stuck with the one burden they could no longer afford to carry, Daniel himself. I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. But then I remembered that Facebook post. Best day with the best people. And the feeling passed completely. Now the only question was whether to leave them to implode on their own, or give them one final push toward complete destruction. Given how perfectly everything had played out so far, I was leaning toward letting gravity finish the job. After all, some lessons are best learned when there's absolutely no way back.